Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Wednesday. About half the work week in the rearview mirror. Appreciate you hanging out with us on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Lots to get to over the next couple of hours. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Number one in the country headed to the PMAC tonight. We'll talk about LSU and Auburn, 6 o'clock tip from just down the street. It's a What If Wednesday. We'll take your what ifs in the Bayou Ford chat as well as on Twitter. Mike McCarthy says he's out for the New Orleans Saints head coaching position and really any head coaching position in the NFL this season. Talk a little bit about that. Matthew Bruni's along at 2 o'clock to talk some hoops with us. LSU baseball position series will continue. Day 2, we'll talk first base today. Kind of know what's at the top of the depth chart there at first base, but what's coming behind Jerry Jones. We'll do a little bit of that. And J.D. Bickell from On3 Sports is going to join us one more time, and then we'll release him for the offseason. We'll talk to J.D. coming up at 2:30. So plenty to do. We'll start the same way we start every single day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
LSU has made, reportedly, a couple of additions to its coaching staff, one yesterday evening and one being reported today. I think the one today probably a little bit more impactful, being that it's a full-time job. So we'll start right there with the report from Matt Zenitz of 24/7 Sports and CBS, as well as Wilson Alexander over at The Advocate, reporting that LSU will tab Alex Atkins as its next tight ends coach. Now, we figured that tight end was going to be covered at some point. Didn't think a full-time special teams coach was going to be on the docket, and that's being confirmed here with this report that Alex Atkins will join the LSU staff. Many of you may be familiar with Alex Atkins. Many of you may have no idea who that is. Alex Atkins was the offensive coordinator at Florida State over the last 3 seasons. He was a college offensive lineman. He played at Tennessee Martin and has ascended the coaching ranks since his playing days. Immediately when he came off the field as a player, he became a coach at his alma mater. He was a GA, then he coached some tight ends, moved on to Marshall where he was a GA, did some community college work, worked his way up through Chattanooga, Georgia Southern, coaching the offensive line, and then got an opportunity to go coach with Willie Fritz and Tulane in 2016. He was the assistant head coach and offensive line coach at Tulane from 2016 to 2018. From there, he moved on to Charlotte, where he became the offensive coordinator at Charlotte. And then he, after 1 season with the 49ers, went to Florida State to coach the offensive line under Mike Norvell. After 2 seasons on the offensive line with Mike Norvell at Florida State, he became the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. Now, it's very important that we talk about the fact that Mike Norvell calls the plays at Florida State. So Alex Atkins was the offensive coordinator. He was not the play caller. Those duties went to Mike Norvell. But Alex Atkins was trusted enough on that staff to be named offensive coordinator. Now, we know in his first year, as Jordan Travis was the quarterback, LSU went to Orlando and played. Well, no, that was 2 years before that. So his first year, that was against New Orleans against LSU, and that was a good Florida State team, had a solid season. And then the following season with Atkins as the offensive coordinator, Florida State led the ACC in scoring. It was Jordan Travis and Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson and all those guys. They, again, led the ACC in scoring, were unbeaten in the regular season, and then were left out of the college football playoff. This past season, it was a disaster in Tallahassee, and a lot of people had to pay the price for that with their jobs, and Alex Atkins was one of those as part of wholesale staff changes, which you know are coming when you go 2-10. Alex Atkins was let go as the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at Florida State. Atkins is thought of as a very, very high-level recruiter. He, of course, was one of the main recruiters on a guy who flipped to LSU from Florida State. If you'll recall, very, very late in the recruiting process, LSU got a big commitment from a 5-star offensive lineman that had previously been committed to Florida State. That, of course, Solomon Thomas. Alex Atkins was the primary recruiter for Solomon Thomas. He got fired. Solomon Thomas said, wait a second, I got to see where things shake out. And he signs at LSU. And then I think probably coincidentally, 2 months later, you've got your answer, and Alex Atkins rejoins him at LSU. So he's going to coach the tight ends. It's something he did very early in his career. It's not not a position that he played, but you are adding a really good recruiter and a guy that a quality program over there at Florida State thought enough of to bring him in as their offensive coordinator. So I think this is a very, very high-level ad for LSU. I think it's a pretty big splash hire, I should say. And it's interesting that Alex Atkins and Slade Nagel worked together at Tulane for 3 years. Slade Nagel was the tight ends coach. He moves on to Houston to be the offensive coordinator, and you replace him with a guy that he's got some familiarity with. So Atkins has recruited the state of Louisiana at Tulane. He's respected in college football circles, and he's a guy that LSU has targeted. And there's nothing official from LSU yet, but it sounds like things are moving in that direction as early as today, that LSU will add Alex Atkins as its tight ends coach. Another ad that was made yesterday in the evening was an analyst on the defensive side of the football, and that's Lance Guidry. Now, that name is probably familiar to a lot of you who are listening. Lance Guidry is a Louisiana native. He is from Welsh, Louisiana. He's 53 years old. He played football in the early 90s at McNeese State as a defensive back. He immediately, when he finished his playing career at McNeese, started up his coaching career as a GA at McNeese. He worked at various high schools in Louisiana, Leesville, Carencro, went back to McNeese and worked there from 2000 to 2003, back to Carencro, back to McNeese. Spent a lot of time in Southwest Louisiana coaching from the time of 1994 through 2008. Then Miami of Ohio gave him a shot to be their defensive backs coach. He became their interim head coach in 2010, was a defensive coordinator at Western Kentucky, interim head coach at Western Kentucky, went back to McNeese, eventually became the head coach at McNeese from 2016 to 2018. He's been a defensive coordinator at Southeastern and has recently been the defensive coordinator at Marshall and Miami since 2001. The big name there, obviously, is Miami. You've got a lot of Western Kentucky, McNeese, Carencro High School, Leesville High School, Southeastern Louisiana, Florida Atlantic, Miami. That was his big opportunity. And, 2 years ago, Miami had pretty good defense. It was a pretty solid team, and they had a quality defense. Last year, the defense was not good at all. It was not. Miami was winning games because Cam Ward was pulling rabbits out of his hat, and Lance Guidry was the defensive coordinator. He was let go in the midst of that really, really big drop-off. Now, you're not hiring Lance Guidry to come in here and be your defensive coordinator. That role is filled. You're not hiring Lance Guidry to come in and be your safeties coach. That role's filled. You're hiring Lance Guidry to come in here and be an analyst, be another set of eyeballs. And I think when you've got coaching experience that date back 30 years, you have spent from 94 through 2008, that's 14 years in Southwest Louisiana. Then you came back and you were at McNeese from 13 to 18. He spent a ton of time in this state. Now, this is not a guy that's going to be out on the road recruiting for you, but he's a relationship guy in that state, knows a lot of high school coaches, knows the state inside and out, and has been respected enough to get an opportunity to be a defensive coordinator in the ACC. So I think as analyst hires go, this is a positive. Do I think it's a huge impact on LSU's football program? I do not. Do I think it's a disaster that you hired the Miami defensive coordinator that was awful this past season in terms of points allowed? No, I don't. I think this is a nice fit for LSU to get another set of eyes into the program. It's very similar to kind of the career that Bob Diaco has had. Diaco ascended a little bit higher. He was defensive coordinator at Notre Dame and then went on to be the head coach at UConn, and you brought him into the building. And you've done that with some different guys. Nick Saban made a habit of taking guys who were a little bit down in their luck and bringing them in as an analyst and kind of rehabilitating their reputation. I think Butch Jones is one of those guys who was the head coach of Tennessee, got fired, came down, was an analyst for a year, boom, pops back up at Arkansas State, that kind of thing. So no, not a big news story. I think a bigger name than a news story in this part of the world. But two guys that will come into LSU, Alex Atkins as the tight end coach, and then Lance Guidry as a defensive analyst. And you're starting to see the staff really take shape here at LSU. There is not a lot to be filled in. You have an unlimited amount of analysts, so if somebody comes open from an NFL roster or squad, or a new coach comes in, he kind of cleans house somewhere, and you want to pull somebody in to come watch tape and help you out with a different set of eyes, you can certainly do that. But LSU will have its position coaches filled. Their special teams role has been filled, and you start to kind of bring in some analysts as well, and then you start to get ready for spring football, which will probably be here a little more quickly than you realize. You're almost a month and a half away from getting things rolling over there on the Ponderosa for some spring football, and certainly Lance Guidry and Alex Atkins look to be involved in all of that. So that's our Genesis opening drive here on this Wednesday. Got a ton to talk about here over the next hour and 45, as I mentioned. Going to get to What If Wednesday here in 20 minutes. If you got a what if for us, fire away. We're going to talk about Mike McCarthy pulling his name out of the Saints job. What does that mean for New Orleans? JD Piquel at 2:30 plus will preview first base. So tons and tons to do. Stick with us here on The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is the website. Genesisofbatonrouge.com is the website. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. They got you covered on the sedans. They got you all the way up to the SUV. I just want you to try. I want you to try sitting behind the wheel of a Genesis. You will see the difference. When you think Genesis, you should think luxury. I know when I say luxury vehicle, there are probably some brands that go to your mind. They've been around a little bit longer. Give Genesis a shot. And when I say luxury, don't go, can't afford that. Just try. Give it a look. I bet you'd be surprised. Start your shopping process online at genesisbatonrouge.com. If you'd like to get behind the wheel, one of their brand ambassadors is happy to help you with all of that. They'll either come to you and let you test drive from the office or from the house, or you can go to them, Airline and Piku, right there where all the dealerships, it seems like, in Baton Rouge are. Make one more stop at Genesis and see the Genesis difference. That's Genesis of Baton Rouge online, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Well, you have to be disciplined. You also have to be disruptive. It's a tough assignment from the standpoint of they have such great balance. They shoot the ball exceptionally well from behind the three-point line with multiple weapons. Then they have arguably the best player in the country to this point, and Janai Broome and his efficiency around the goal. And then it seems everyone plays their role. They get to the free throw line. They're on the offensive glass. There's not just one thing you say you have to take away. So I think physicality, toughness, the ability to guard inside and out and defend their balance is certainly quite a challenge, but we'll have to be ready for all of those things.
That's LSU head basketball coach Matt McMahon as he previews the Auburn Tigers, ranked number 1 in the country coming into the PMAC tonight. That's not something you see every day, not something you see every year, the number 1 team in the country coming to Baton Rouge, but it is the case this evening for a 6 o'clock tip-off in the PMAC. As he mentioned there, Auburn's just really, really, really good. It's crazy because I can remember vividly Bruce Pearl taking a bad Auburn team over, and in his first year they weren't very good, and they kind of got hot in the SEC tournament. I think they won 2 or 3 games in the SEC tournament with a bad team. They were probably in a 12 or 14 team league. I don't even remember. I'm sure it was 14 at that point. They probably won 2-3 games in the SEC tournament. And they were probably the 12 seed or something. And now he's got them as a well-oiled machine. He's been to a Final Four and now has this team number 1 in the country. And they've been as consistent as anybody. We're talking about a team in Auburn that's 18-1. They're 6-0 in the league. They beat Houston in Houston. Houston's currently ranked 6th in the country. They beat Iowa State, North Carolina, and Memphis in Maui. Iowa State is currently number 3 in the country. Memphis currently number 19. They beat Purdue in Birmingham. Purdue is currently number 10. They beat Ohio State in Atlanta. I mean, these are high-level non-conference wins, 3 of them in the top 10 in non-conference play, and then their only loss is to number 2, currently, Duke, in Cameron Indoor. So that's a pretty salty resume to this point. If you look at them surface level on the metrics, Their offensive efficiency is second in the country. Their defensive efficiency is 22nd in the country. They're excellent at both. Offensively, elite stuff. Ninth in the country in points per game, ninth in the league in shooting percentage, ninth in the country in points per game, ninth in the country in shooting percentage, fourth in the country in assist to a turnover ratio, and 23rd in the country in offensive rebounding. So top 25 in all those stats, top 10 in most of them. Opposing shooting percentage on defense, 14th. Block percentage, they're second in the nation. They force people into turnovers. They defensive rebound. They're just very, very, very good. I will say this. They have played close games, plural, with some of the lesser teams in the SEC. They only beat South Carolina by 3. South Carolina has not won a league game yet. Now, in that game, South Carolina only turned the ball over 9 times. They won the backboard 37-33. Like, they stayed in the fight by taking care of the ball and getting on the glass. Georgia's not very good. Auburn and Georgia played a 2-point game. And Georgia in that game was 9 of 20 on free throws. They missed 11 free throws and lost by 2 to the number 1 team in the country. Texas isn't great. 3-win league team. They scored 55.5 on Auburn and only lost by 5. So it's not like Auburn is just steamrolling everybody. Now, they've steamrolled some. They crushed Mississippi State. They crushed Missouri. Like, they can do that. But they've played some tight teams. I mean, I'm not even talking about Tennessee, who they played a 2-point game against over the weekend. I'm talking about South Carolina, Georgia, and Texas. So it's possible, but there's a reason LSU's 12.5-point dog in this game at home. Auburn is incredibly good at shooting the 3 ball. You heard Matt McMahon say that in the bite we just played to intro this segment. To put numbers to it, Tahad Pettiford, who, oh, by the way, I want to point this out too, as I mentioned Tahad Pettiford's name. He is a 5-star recruit, number 1 player in the country, top 10 player in the country, great recruit that they signed in this freshman class. Nobody else is of that ilk. This is a group that Bruce Pearl put together very, very deliberately and is not star-studded. You're talking about a team that has Janai Broome, who they got from Morehead State. You're talking about a team that has Chad Baker-Mazara, who's going to be a first-team All-SEC player. They got him at Northwest Florida State College. Denver Jones was at FIU and starts for him. Miles Kelly was at Georgia Tech, but he was an honorable mention ACC player. It's not like he was at Duke and he's going to be the 3rd pick in the draft. They have gone and found guys that fit what they want to do, and they do it as well as anybody in college basketball. Now, Chad Baker-Mazara, who I just mentioned to you, he shoots 38% from 3 and 93% from the free throw line. Tahad Pettiford, 42% from the 3. Miles Kelly, 43% from 3. Denver Jones, 40% from 3. That is 3 guys who constantly play in the backcourt for them, who outside of Pettiford start, that are shooting 40+% from 3, and that doesn't mention Chad Baker-Mazara, who is 38% from 3. And if it's not bad enough that they've got 4 guys who are lethal from behind the arc, Janai Broome plays on the post, and he could win not the SEC Player of the Year, National Player of the Year. That's the type of year he's having. Right now, Janai Broome is averaging 17.8 points per game and 10.9 rebounds, so 11 rebounds per game. And he's not doing it from the 3-point line. He's not doing it a lot off the bounce. He's doing it because he's mean and strong and physical, and he finishes around the rim really, really, really well. It is a very, very difficult team to defend because they're technically sound and they're really good at shooting the ball. The one thing that I love about Bruce Pearl's teams when I watch them is not only that they play with a lot of spirit and a lot of energy because he demands that, but Bruce Pearl's Auburn teams, since he got there, run an offense that I ran in high school, that everyone who has ever played basketball at the collegiate level knows by heart. It's called flex. You run a flex cut across the baseline, you bring a guy up on the opposite side from the block to the 3-point line, and then you do it again, and they run this pretty frequently. And I know where every player on the floor is supposed to be. I know. I haven't run this offense since 2006. It's been 20 years, and I know it, and they still get good shots out of it because they know how to screen, they make good decisions, they make good passes, and they make shots. It's awesome if you can draw up a super creative play that runs you out the back for a lob and you back pick and you get one dunk out of a 40-minute game. That's cool. It looks great. But when you can do something that everybody understands and that a team is prepared very much for it and they still don't stop it very well, that because you run it properly and you know what you're doing. And that is, to me, the essence of this Auburn program. Yeah, they had Jabari Smith. But more of his teams have looked like this one that are just some pretty talented guys with some length that play hard, make some shots. They're not going to have the Kentucky team that has the 3rd, 6th, and 15th pick in the draft when Calipari is there, but they just win a lot of games. And to me, that's the most important thing about Auburn. Now, as far as LSU goes in this game, there are some things they've got to do in this game, and one is take care of the ball. Auburn plays really good defense. I mentioned to you that they're 22nd in the country in defensive efficiency, but they don't turn teams over at some exorbitant rate. Like Vanderbilt and Missouri, who LSU got right out of the chute, turned teams over a lot. They turned teams over a lot in December and November. They turned LSU over a lot. They've continued to turn teams over a lot. That's part of what they do. Auburn doesn't really do that. They block a ton of shots and they sit down and guard, but they don't turn teams over a lot. That's been a bugaboo for LSU. If LSU turns it over 18 times tonight, you already know what's going to happen. But if they can do what a lot of teams, South Carolina, who I just mentioned included, and they can only turn it over 10 times or maybe 12 times with 2 shot clock violations, well, you can start talking about LSU potentially scoring some points in this game. The other thing is, I told you leading up to the Arkansas game, Arkansas at that point led the nation in block percentage. And I said LSU is going to have to sit back and make some threes because Jordan Sears at 5'10" and Cam Carter, as thin as he is, trying to drive in there and create a lot of shots at the rim against the best shot blocking team they've seen thus far doesn't sound like a great recipe. Well, shows what I know because LSU drove it in there and drove it in there and drove it in there and drove it in there, and they shot 30 free throws. And they won the game by a bucket because they dominated the free throw line. I think they were 26 of 28 in the game. And to me, this feels the same. Like, you need to just attack. I know Auburn blocked some shots, and they're going to block some shots tonight. But the fact of the matter is that LSU is one of the best free throw shooting teams in the country and one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the Power 5. I laid out all those numbers for you yesterday. LSU is the 4th worst three-point shooting team in all the Power 5. Only 3 teams are worse. So why would you sit back there and try to depend on it? Get to the line. Jacob Beck, you can open your microphone. Cam Carter and Jordan Sears have shot 51 free throws in league games this year. How many do you think they've made out of 51?
47?
50. 50 out of 51.
That's pretty good.
And they're not making threes. So let's try to shoot some free throws.
Well, and Matt McMahon, when somebody asked him about what they can do about combating the shooting woes, he mentioned that it's not going to be like we're not just going to become an elite three-point shooting team. Like, we're going to have to figure out other ways to get more points. And he mentioned getting to the free throw line more because we are the best shooting free throw percentage wise. We're the best shooting team in the SEC.
Yeah, when your backcourt goes 50 of 51, you got a pretty decent chance to lead the league in free throws. And the other piece to this is you've got to go to the glass. You have to go to the glass. Auburn is elite in all those metrics I gave you. Offensive efficiency, points per game, shooting percentage, assist to turnover, offensive rebounds, defensive efficiency, opposing shooting percentage, block rate. They are in the top 23 in every one of those metrics I gave you. And being in the top 23 out of 350-something is way, way up there. And so the number I'm about to give you isn't terrible, but it's not the same elite metric that they always have across the board here. And it's defensive rebounding percentage. They're only 102nd. LSU's actually done a decent job on the offensive glass this year. They've got to do that again. And Corey Chest was a monster in that game in Tuscaloosa. And on Monday, Matt McMahon met with the media, and had some quotes that I want to play for you here. And one of them was on Corey Chest and what he saw in that effort that we had not seen really in a month.
Well, Corey certainly stands out, getting 18 in a game. And that's what we need from him. But I had really challenged him from an energy and a motor standpoint, and I thought he really stepped forward to the plate. He also blocked 3 shots. I thought he just flew around, was everywhere on the floor. He got to the rim, finished some plays, goes on the road and gets a double-double.
Let's just call this what it is. This is not going to be a full PMAC tonight. It's not going to be a raucous environment. It'll probably be the least intimidating environment that Auburn plays in the entirety of SEC play. I'm just calling it like it is. It's a Wednesday night. It's at 6:00, and LSU is 1-6 in the league, 1-5. I don't even know, 1 and something. And there's a possibility that you catch Auburn sleeping a little bit. There's a chance. If Auburn comes out and plays their A- game tonight, LSU can't win. It's just, it is what it is. They're the number 1 team in the nation. Their only loss this year is at Duke. But if they're sleeping a little bit and LSU brings the punch and plays one of their best games, and of course Cam Carter's going to have to score 25 points, and you're going to have to get to the free throw line, and a lot's got to go right. But I'm trying to analyze the game. I could just come on and say, yeah, Auburn's number 1, LSU's going to get beat by 25, on to the next. But they fought and scrapped and clawed at Texas A&M, and they fought and they scrapped and they clawed in Tuscaloosa, and I expect they're going to fight and scrap and claw tonight. If Auburn plays a great game, see ya. If they don't, we'll see. They didn't against South Carolina, didn't against Georgia. LSU's going to hope for that, and hopefully they play one of their better games tonight. Again, 6:00 tonight in the PMAC. We'll talk to Matthew Bruni about it in 30 minutes. It's a What If Wednesday. If you're in the Bayou Ford chat, fire them away. We'll get to those coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge. Our guy J.D. Piquel along in an hour. Will be his last appearance for a little bit as we let him ease into the offseason here. College football in the rearview mirror from a games perspective now. I guess it's never truly in the rearview mirror. There's always something going on, hiring coaches, portal stuff, spring ball, whatever the case may be. And then rules and regulations seem to change constantly. So we'll get JD's thoughts on a number of college football topics in hour number 2. Matthew Bruni will be along in 25 minutes to talk LSU hoops as well. So plenty to do right now. It's time for What If Wednesday.
Time, space, reality. It's more than a linear path. Where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
Alrighty, first one here. What if LSU beats Auburn tonight?
If LSU beats Auburn tonight, that would be a really good week of basketball.
It would be.
They played really well for a long stretch of time in Tuscaloosa. That would take another 40 minutes of really good basketball tonight to beat Auburn. And that would, prove that you can play with just about anybody. You can go to Tuscaloosa and hang in there, and you can beat Auburn at home. You can play with just about anybody. I don't think it would reset the trajectory of the season or make them a bubble team at this point, but it would mean that they had played really well in 2 games after a week off with no game in the midweek last week when we were dealing with snowpocalypse. So I don't have any hot take about it other than to say that'd be really good if they could win tonight.
All right, next one here. What if Kellen Moore says no?
Look, I'm going to stand firm in my position that it's about the result as opposed to the process. We can all draw our conclusions. It's very easy to do, to say nobody wants a job, the Saints are the worst organization in the league, this and that, this and that. We don't know if any of these coaches are any good anyway. So I'm more concerned in the result than the process. If Kellen Moore says he doesn't want it, I think there are some guys that certainly. Mike Kafka told our team at LouisianaSports.net and OTB yesterday that he wanted the job. So somebody will eventually take it. And I don't know if Kellen Moore's a better coach than Mike Kafka or not. We'll just have to see how they shake out.
All righty, next one. What if you could guarantee one win for LSU football next season?
One win for LSU football next season. I got to go with Clemson. I mean, selfishly, you would hear me say at Bama or Texas A&M, and that makes more sense for the conference. But I feel like you were putting yourself so far behind the 8 ball by losing the opening game. And if you can go on the road and beat Clemson in the opener, team that's probably going to be favored to win the ACC, that would be a big statement. One, that means like you're here, you mean business, and you've got a chance to be really relevant this year. And two, avoids just getting off on such an awful foot that you're walking a high wire from Labor Day to Thanksgiving like you have the last 3 years. It's really hard to do. So I think I would probably unselfishly go with Clemson. Selfishly, I'd probably take one of the SEC teams I dislike more than Clemson.
Yeah, it's hard to choose any other one besides Clemson. When you've lost the first game of your season, you've lost your season opener for 4 years in a row. You've got to get over that hump, and I would go with Clemson too. All right, next one. What if Super Bowl travelers asked you for one food recommendation for lunch and one for dinner?
Interesting. For lunch, to me, I just have a hard time getting past a Parkway po' boy.
Yeah.
That's my favorite po' boy in the city. There are certainly others that I very, very much like. But Parkway, to me, you get the surf and turf with the shrimp and the roast beef and gravy. That is as good as it gets. I told this story, I think, before. I had a guy come down that was interning with another website in town that was from Minnesota, and he lived with me for the summer in 2013, I want to say. And that was the last thing we did. We went out to New Orleans, saw the French Quarter. We went out to Parkway and got a po' boy for lunch. I would go get a big po' boy if it's your first time in New Orleans. For dinner, I'm probably going to go a little pricier, a little more upscale if you're going to be in NOLA. And Parkway, that's just, it's an expensive sandwich, but it's a sandwich, no less. You can get that for $18 or something. I would go between Arno's and the Italian Barrel and Irene's. I'll land on Irene's. I'll go with Irene's. It's got some it's got seafood. They've also got Italian as well. It's white tablecloth. It's got great little ambiance there. It's in the quarter. Wife and I did her birthday dinner there last year. So I'd go Parkway and Irene's. That's my two picks.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter a few days ago, frequent Hunt Palmer Show collaborator Luke Johnson. He wrote up a list that was quite robust in all of the options. So I thought that was he had everything on there that I saw was quality stuff, which would you come to expect from a guy, Luke. So
Luke knows his food. That's one of the great perks of being an NFL beat writer.
Yes,
is those Sunday games mean Saturday nights in all the great cities in America. So you can find some good food.
All right, we got some in the chat here. First one that I see that I like is, what if Red Baron and Bud Light collaborated on combo packs?
They'd have a customer.
They would.
That'd be a really cold beer to put in where the frozen pizza goes. You may have an issue there with where to store those.
Maybe so, yeah.
But that they'd have a customer for sure. Have you seen those adult Lunchables?
No.
They're on I don't know if I've ever seen one in person, but I've certainly seen them on Instagram. It's like adult Lunchable, and it's like a ribeye and a baked potato and like a 16-ounce beer. It's all put into one thing in saran wrap.
I actually have seen that at Rouse's. I don't know if you? Yeah, I saw it at Rouse's before.
Rouse's.
They had it was in the meat. It was in
adult
their
Lunchable.
They had it was a container with a Bud Light and a steak and I think a potato in it, it's wrapped up.
Adult Lunchable. There you go. Rouse's.
Shout out to Rouse's.
Don't know that I've ever seen there.
All right, next one here. What if Mickey Loomis? Okay, that one's stupid. What if the Jazz never left New Orleans?
I think it'd be the same as the Pelicans. It's a small market. Basketball's not rooted in it.
Yeah, no, I think it would just be the culture, I think, of the team would just be maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, it'd be more sentimental to New Orleans than a brand new franchise that unveiled brand new uniforms, and they'd have the green, gold, and the colors would look better. but they still, I don't think, would be a very good franchise because it's just not a desirable place to play. It's not in a place that's basketball centric. It's a small market. They don't fill the arena. It's just is what it is.
All right, next one here. What if LSU football loses 4 games in a row next season? They could do it. If you look at the schedule, it's possible.
Sure. In the SEC, anything, especially Nussmeier, does something, knock on wood. But, that's very possible. That'd be a disaster. I mean, losing 4 games in a row next year, maybe a total of 5 if you're what-ifing your way to that, that would be a disaster. You would put the resources in to be a 10-2 playoff team next year. If you lose 4 in a row, you've got real problems.
All right, one more here. Let's just suspend some. This is a true what if in what if fashion.
Okay.
What if the New Orleans Saints hired Nick Saban as their next head coach?
I don't think that would be a very good hire.
Yeah, probably not.
You've got a team that is not going to be very good next year. He's in his mid-70s at this point.
It would draw some fans.
It would, create some interest. And, I think he is obviously a great football coach, but you still don't have a quarterback, which he didn't have in Miami. And, I just don't think I don't think it would yield very good results.
Yeah.
You're 2 years from being good, and at that point he's even older.
I wonder. It's hard. We'll never know, but I truly wonder if North Carolina really thinks that Bill Belichick is going to be able to build a successful program there.
It's kind of the Colorado thing that it's like if we create a little bit of buzz, people care, we sell some tickets and we win some games, it's fine. I don't think that neither North Carolina nor Colorado has delusions like this is gonna create multiple national championships for us because that's Deion Sanders and that's Bill Belichick. I think they're just kind of fishing for relevance, and if you go hire the Troy head coach, if you're North Carolina,
no one's gonna care.
Does that do anything for you? It's just probably another guy you run out of town in 5 years and try again. So, is that it?
That's it.
All right, we'll take a time out, come back and close out the hour. Mike McCarthy said no to the New Orleans Saints. What does that mean? I'm kind of a little more level-headed than most on this, but I'll give you my thoughts. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
All right, wrapping up hour number 1 here, Wednesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. You were tuned in to the New Orleans coaching search. Yesterday, you found out that Mike McCarthy reportedly has said thanks, but no thanks. He will sit out this coaching cycle. He will sit out a year. Feels like there will be opportunities for him next year. And the resounding chorus I'm hearing from most with this New Orleans Saints coaching search is this is the worst spot in the NFL. They can't hire anybody. They're at the bottom of the barrel. It's the worst situation in the sport. There's no way anybody can rescue it. No one's even taking the job. Loomis is a disaster. This is the worst this franchise has ever been. That's kind of the resounding chorus. The Saints are a laughing stock. And look, that all may be true. It may be true.
I was listening to OTB this morning. Hester said he talked to somebody that works in the NFL for a team, and they said that this is the worst job in the NFL in the last 10 years.
Okay. I can't disprove that. What I also want to point out is that the folks that have said no to this job are Ben Johnson, who's never been the head coach of a football game in the NFL in his life, Aaron Glenn, who's never been a head coach in his life, Joe Brady, who's never been a head coach in his life, and Mike McCarthy, who everybody told me, well, the guy's reached his ceiling. He can't win playoff games, can't beat the good teams, beats up on the bottom feeders. He's past his prime. He needs Aaron Rodgers to win a Super Bowl. And so, I'm sitting here going, okay, we can't have it both ways. You can't tell me that, Aaron Glenn comes from the Dennis Allen tree, and his defense got carved up, and you got to turn over a new leaf, and Joe Brady's too young, it's never done it, and Ben Johnson's not even going to give us a look, and McCarthy's over the hill, and we don't want Rizzi because he's the special teams coach, and then say, well, they're terrible. See, none of these guys will take the job. My thing on this is we all knew that the Saints job had its issues. None of this is new information. We know the salary cap. We know the quarterback. We know the roster and the age and the talent level and the no Pro Bowlers. We know all of that. But most of the time, when you're a head coach, you're taking over a pretty dicey proposition. Jaden Daniels doesn't fall in your lap very often, Dan Quinn. That's just not the way most of these work. So whoever it was that was going to take over this job, and whoever it is that will eventually take over this job, like, we know that there is a lot of work to do. What needs to be established, the Saints understand they've got to shed salary cap. They've got to let some of these older players age off the roster. They got to quit restructuring contracts. And there are roadmaps that have shown us that you can get this done. Houston has gotten it done. They went from a disaster who was turning over coach after coach after coach to a relevant team in the AFC. Are they one of the best teams in the AFC? It's a pretty tall mountain to climb with the Chiefs and the Bills hanging out over there and the Ravens right there, and you kind of know how that story goes. But they drafted Nico Collins, and they drafted Derek Stingley, and they drafted Will Anderson, and they drafted C.J. Stroud, and they did some smart things to immediately enhance that draft, that roster, and they turned it over in a couple of years. And that's what you're asking the Saints to do. If you told me that Jim Harbaugh was available in this cycle, I would think differently. If you told me that Andy Reid, as of pre-Chiefs from the Eagles, who had been to the NFC Championship game 4 times, if he was available, okay. This coaching cycle has been a bunch of guys who have never done it and Pete Carroll. So who's to say the guy that the Saints get is no better than Liam Cohen or no better than Aaron Glenn? Who's to say he's not better than Pete Carroll right now? I don't know. I don't feel like I'm 100% sure. The Saints are just striking out left and right. That's all I'm saying. Let me see what the result is. Let me see what that vision looks like. As long as the Saints are willing to shift gears and you understand the expectation level is not through the roof in 2025, you have to then realize, okay, you just got to take things slow. And maybe the coach that takes this job gets a chance to grow up a little bit and gain some experience on the job. It's not like the free agency market where you know what you're missing out on. If there's an all-pro guard on the market that won't give you a visit, you know you've missed the boat on that guy. He's an all-pro. All these coaches were laughing at the Saints over missing out on. There are mixed reviews on them. I have talked negatively about the Saints and the state of the organization for a year and a half. Y'all know that. It hasn't been overly popular. It has been popular. It hasn't been overly complicated. The Saints are in a bad spot. They're still in a bad spot. But I'm going to let this process play out and see who they land on. I don't know if Kellen Moore is any better than Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen. They kind of have the same profile. But nobody thought that Dan Campbell was a home run when he was hired. I've got my doubts about whether anybody thought that John Harbaugh was just going to be an absolute slam dunk. Mike Tomlin would have been a coordinator for 10 minutes when he got hired. So the fact of the matter is that there are lots of different ways these things generally shake out. Some of the really clean processes end up in disaster. Some of the real clunky ones find gold. Most of them are unsuccessful. And if you ask me to bet what the result of this Saints coaching search is going to be, I would say probably unsuccessful. They'll probably be in the market for a new coach in the next 4 years, like most teams are, like they were when they hired Dennis Allen. But I'm just not at the point where I'm going to go nuts over the Saints swinging and missing on Joe Brady. I'm not. I'm not going to go nuts because Mike McCarthy wants complete control. Let's just see how it plays out. The Saints are a ways away from being good. Maybe you get somebody in that can learn on the job and grow up while you're overhauling the roster. And what's very obvious to me, I think it's far more important how they handle the roster composition over the next 24 months than it is who this coach is right here. That's my opinion. The focus needs to be on the draft. You're going to get a coach, and you hope it's great. But the roster composition that is currently in New Orleans will not allow any coach to have a lot of success. That's the thing that's got to change most drastically. It's the Kirby Smart theory. It's players, not coaches. Players, not plays. The Saints got to get better players. That's one thing that they've got to do in a hurry. They'll get the coach thing figured out. We'll see. I'm not in a laughing mode at the moment just yet because you couldn't hire Liam Cohen. That's where I am on it. Look at our Saints coverage. You can find it on YouTube. Hunt on Saints. Hunt on Saints, wherever you find your podcast as well. We'll step aside for some Sports Center. First base preview coming up, and Matthew Bruni on Hoops. Don't go anywhere. It is the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is the website. 10 years, 100,000-mile warranty. 10 years, 100,000-mile warranty. That's a pretty good gig there. How about 3 years of complimentary maintenance? My kid's 3. I promise you, it's a long time of complimentary maintenance. Myersman's been around for a while, it feels like. You can get 3 years of complimentary maintenance from the folks at Genesis Baton Rouge. And on top of that, you can make that complimentary maintenance valet. They come to you, pick your car up, leave you a car, bring the car to the dealership, get all your service done, oil change, air filter, wiper blades, wiper fluid, all that kind of stuff. Bring the car right back to you. You don't miss a beat. That's the beauty of being a Genesis of Baton Rouge customer. Every car that is on the lot at Airline and Pico is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. genesisofbatonrouge.com.